Mexico and China have always been where the United States seems to send all of their manufacturing. But trade wars going all the way back to even 2018 in the first Trump administration have made some companies question whether or not those two places are the most stable. Well, now there's a place that some companies are considering moving to that has a strong manufacturing hub, but is relatively unknown as a place to move operations. Until now, the biggest logo manufacturer in the world just moved operations from Mexico here to the Dominican Republic. Not China, not Costa Rica, DR. In today's video, I'm going to share that story, including an interview with Randy Carr, the CEO of World Emblem. And we're going to talk about why he chose Dominican Republic, what kind of job opportunities that brings here, if this is the beginning of a massive migration here, and I'm going to share 3 things the government must do in order to capitalize. Let's dive in. The day I sat down with Randy Carr, the World Emblem CEO, happened to be the same day CNN released a whole feature on him, along with the New York Times. But check out what CNN said.
In Mexico, but Phil, some hurdles. We're talking about space. It's a small island, not a ton of space to manufacture. And because of the size, fewer skilled workers. And then the biggest issue that I've heard from people is people just simply don't know, Phil, that there's a big manufacturing capacity in the Dominican Republic. I asked the CEO of World Emblem how he found out about the Dominican Republic. He's moving 30 to 35% of his production there. This is the reason, and this is why he heard about where to move all of his production. ChatGPT. That's where he got the answer. It just shows it wasn't well known to him, but he got his answer from AI, and now he's spending millions there, Phil.
That's crazy. ChatGPT revealed to him, maybe this Dominican Republic place might be a spot to go. Well, I wanted to go deeper with him on that. So I asked him to share exactly the story of how he ended up landing on the Dominican Republic. And he went to 3 different countries, Guatemala, Nicaragua, and here. And here's what he said.
We landed on the Dominican Republic purely because I would say the government is what engaged us the most. We just felt better. We just felt better about the free trade zones. We felt better about, I'm a YPOer, I'm in YPO.
Yeah.
So when engaging with the YPO community down there, they were very ingratiating. They connected me with a couple of different free trade zones, 2 law firms, and within 2 days, we knew it right away. It just, everything connected, everything felt right. We toured the free trade zone that we liked. And within, I'd say within 3 weeks, we were under an agreement to sign a lease. And, we just recently signed it a couple weeks ago.
So what does this mean for manufacturing? That's what I wanted to know. Just overall here in DR, if a global CEO of a 9-figure business comes here after going to a few other places and says, that's the spot, what's next? Does he think other businesses are going to follow suit? And here's what he had to say about that.
I can't imagine them not. There's such a stigma. So there's a lot of interest in what we're doing. To your point from earlier, I'm just surprised that no one's seen it.
Yeah.
But, maybe I'm wrong, but we all still think we're really right. And obviously you do too, or you wouldn't have me on your show today. Right. And we're really excited to diversify our supply chain and just see what the future holds for us in the Dominican.
I've been married to a Dominican woman for 15 years. I've been coming here a while, and I always wondered, why don't I hear more about this being a nearshore hub for the last 15 years? And in the last couple of years, there's been moves in that direction. Zona Franca, the free trade zones, and then you came, and you almost validated a 15-year thesis of mine. There we go. Somebody finally said, yeah, let's move some operations there. Was there something specific that you recall that was a tipping point, or was it just...
No.
Now, this isn't really a new conversation. I actually talked about this about 2 years ago with a good friend of mine and a CEO of a company called Mudlove. His name is Caleb France. He bought Mudlove in Indiana and moved it down to the Dominican Republic, and he does a lot of mission-focused work here on top of running his business. Incredible guy. He was on my podcast back then, and here's a little bit of a sizzle reel on what we discussed specifically.
What do you mean by they don't want to tell the China story anymore?
People are starting to look for other options. We see people searching out nearshore or made in the United States.
It always felt to me like the DR is plenty of labor, plenty of willing people. Is this a spot that starts to replace Chinese production work in any way? Made in DR as opposed to made in China. Are you seeing that right now?
I've met a handful of American families that live in the DR out of 12 million people.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I can look at Miami from here. Where's everybody at? What's going on?
Right.
And not only that, the Dominican Republic has these Zona Francas, which are free trade zone agreements with the United States for 0 import-export tax. Why is everybody not down here making stuff, right?
Why aren't they?
Now that full interview, along with the whole interview with Randy Carr, the World Emblem CEO, is available in the DR Inner Circle. And this is a place where I can provide exclusive real estate tours and content, interact with people in our private Facebook community, and the community itself is starting to share with one another. We're pushing 200 members, 200 people who want to either live here or do live here or want to move here and build community around. That plus discounts at local restaurants and so much more. You can click the link below. It's only $9 a month to be a member, and it's a place where I can provide maximum value for all of you. So now we know why Dominican Republic and what he believes the impact will be of other businesses moving operations to DR. But what about jobs? Well, I'm going to share what he's going to do, and then I'm going to talk to you about a few things that are happening and evidence on how those can actually create some really high-paying jobs here in country.
So the timeline's probably, we think between January and February will be open. Now,
Wow.
It really depends on the FTZ and the build.
Yeah.
Because we're building from the ground up.
I was going to ask, are you taking over existing facility? No, you're building your own facility.
There is no property, nothing.
Meaning it's all taken, or they're just
taken. Everything's taken.
That's a good
Everything's
sign.
Taken. I would already be there. Like I was ready to start moving the day I got there. So yeah, we had to engage in the lease, and we have to get the FTZ. There's a lot of red tape. No more than doing anything else in any country. I'm not being critical,
No.
but you gotta jump through those hoops.
What's really interesting is the fact that while the Dominican Republic has had manufacturing, Hanes and Timberland and other textile companies in particular have been here, it's also relatively unknown, as we talked about with the CNN article and what Randy Carr said from World Emblem. But even still, they need to build space for manufacturing in Santiago. There's no space still available. Then we talked about the level of jobs and how many there would be, and here's what he had to say.
The level of jobs that we'll be putting in the DR in probably the first 2 years will be probably let's say 100 to 500, right? So the answer is that's a wide, so 100 to 500 is wide. Day one, we'll staff up at 100. Depending on how things go, we could be up to 500 in the space that we allocated. After 500, depending on success, then we reassess it.
The last thing I wanted to know was, what about the unpredictability of the Trump administration? Hey, if he's tariffed Mexico and he's tariffed China, and therefore he's picking up operations and moving it here, how does he know that it's actually going to work? How does he know DR isn't the next target? Here's what he had to say.
Marco Rubio was just there 2 weeks before us, which tells me the current administration is okay with it. There's a pretty big trade surplus between the states and
I was going to ask you that. Is that I've said that too. Like trade, Trump is all about trade surplus. He goes after where there's a deficit. There's not that.
He's not going to fire. This is an opinion because you never know right now, but it's less of a reason for him to fire a cannon in that direction.
Now, there's actually a blueprint for this. Other countries have moved forward and taken low-level manufacturing like what's coming in now and turned it into high-level manufacturing. And I'm going to share that blueprint and also what the country is doing well and what it needs to improve upon in order to adhere to that blueprint and become the next manufacturing superpower. But before I do that, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, who actually owns the place I'm standing in right now. BM Cargo is a premier logistics company here in the Dominican Republic with offices in many other countries, including the United States. For me, we get our stuff shipped to an address in Miami and then brought over here, and we pick it up at a local store to us, and they have over 60 of them around the country. This location in Bávaro is a co-working space along with a cafe downstairs, and they also have their packaging system here as well. But it's a great place to come if you're a digital nomad or a remote worker, hang out, get some space to work in, whether it's a conference room or an office, and grab yourself one of these really cool drinks with this really cool logo on it. Check out this one about the Dominican Republic. But even cooler is this one, which is, me. Go to bmcargo.com to check them out, and I'm gonna enjoy a little bit of hot cocoa. All right, so the question becomes, hey, this is great. Manufacturing is great to bring to DR, but it's just low-paying jobs, which we consider low-paying jobs as Americans. But if somebody here making $500 to $1,000 a month or whatever, that's good wages. That's middle-class income. But I am in total agreement that there needs to be a pathway to more livable, higher-level wages. And also, there's some low-income housing issues that are happening in places like Santiago and so on. And I'm going to talk about all of that. But essentially, there's a blueprint, and 3 countries have forged it. That is Singapore, Taiwan, and Vietnam. Vietnam is more kind of happening now, but all of them did some of the same things. And at the same time, places like Mexico and Costa Rica have also had manufacturing come into their country, but they've done it all wrong. And I'll be honest, what came to my mind immediately was like, are Asian governments and Asian cultures just a little bit more advanced or maybe less corrupt than many Latin American cultures and Latin American governments? And maybe, but the Dominican Republic is behaving honestly a little bit more like those Asian nations than it is Mexico and Costa Rica. Let me explain. The three Asian nations I just mentioned did a few things that are essential. Number one, they brought in manufacturing like textiles in order to show that they are business friendly. Two, they established free trade zones to limit the expenses of business when shipping exports to other countries. Number three, they prioritized highly skilled industries that they could bring in later, essentially picking winners, industry winners that they could bring in on the back of the lower level manufacturing that they built as a base in their countries. And lastly, they invested in highly skilled workers' education and just education in general. These are the exact steps that these countries took in order to achieve prosperity in their culture, not just low-level workers, but mid-tier and higher. And while culturally there's a difference, does it mean that a Latin American country can't take their cues and follow suit? It doesn't mean that at all. In fact, many actions that this administration in the Dominican Republic are taking align more with those three Asian nations than they do with Mexico. Let me give you 5. Number 1, this administration has been tougher on corruption with more prosecutions than any other previous administration by a mile. Number 2, they have signaled business friendliness. As Randy Carr said, he came here and was like, whoa, this government is extremely accommodating to business. I'm in. 2 days later, he's building a factory. Number 3, they're prioritizing semiconductor production. Remember how I said those three Asian nations picked winners? They found an industry that was bigger than just textiles or lower level manufacturing in order to win with, something that Mexico didn't do. DR has a national priority around semiconductor manufacturing, and they're all in on it. Mexico, while it has some manufacturing there, the government's very hands-off. They're just sort of like, okay, great, it's here, but they're not as invested as DR has been, just like Singapore, Vietnam, and what's the other one? Oh yeah, South Korea, how they have been. 4th, Abinader has created partnerships with places like the University of Cincinnati for upskilling workers that can live and work here in the Dominican Republic. Higher wage, higher skilled labor, specifically for semiconductors. And last, there is a long-term national vision. The DR 2030 plan is an example, but that's just something that's more present here than it is in most other Latin American countries. Vision sets policy, and when you look at El Salvador, big vision, big policy, big action, they cleaned quite a bit there. Again, Mexico didn't have this clear vision. They didn't set policy in that direction. They didn't invest as heavily in education, and more importantly, they allowed the cartels to just run wild. I mean, they've been labeled a terrorist organization by the US government because they literally run Mexico. That's not what Taiwan is doing, not what South Korea is doing, and not what Vietnam is doing. So I hope that we continue to go down the path here of what the Asian nations are doing and not some of the Latin American countries of the past. Now look, all that sounds great, but there's still a few key things that have to happen, Abinader being absolutely responsible for it, in order for this to all come to fruition, to tie a bow on this little gift of potential upskilling of this workforce and a bigger and more robust middle class. The first one is these corruption cases that have been prosecuted need convictions. You can go back and find corruption cases that were prosecuted by prior administrations, and you have to, just by the numbers, never mind if you like them or hate them, you have to see that there have been way more prosecutions under Abinader than any of the prior 5 administrations. Maybe none of them has been as sensational as like the Odebrecht scandal, but many more prosecutions. But prosecutions don't mean necessarily that you're going to get convicted and then put in jail. And the actors that have been corrupt need to be. In addition, all of the people being prosecuted do not exist, or at least most of them, within Abinader's administration. They're all prior administrations. So for those that are critical and saying, hey, corruption, great, yeah, you're prosecuted, but nobody gets a consequence, you're right. Until you see some of these bad actors get prosecuted and put in jail, and then honestly, until you see the current administration dive into its own administration and find and root out corruption, your credibility is always going to be in question. Bringing in manufacturing is going to be like, yeah, great, who cares? It's all going to go to the elites, and those elites will never face a day in jail, and they know it. The moment somebody gets convicted and put in jail, that's higher profile over corruption, that'll be a banner moment and a really good indicator of the direction of the Dominican Republic. If it doesn't happen, big fail. Number 2, you need to stay the course with Taiwan, South Korea, and Vietnam. Government needs to stay involved. They need to pick winners as they have been. They need to see this all the way through. If they don't, then you're going to go the way of Mexico. Like, wow, all this cool stuff happening. But in the end, nothing really elevates wages in the population. Nothing creates that South Korea-like middle class that they have. So far, the things I indicated, Abinader's rhetoric and policy have aligned more with these three Asian nations than they have with any Latin American country before. And there's been some level of follow through. Number one, I told you about, he's got to follow through on corruption. But number two is really he has to stay the course with all aspects of his plan to elevate the Dominican Republic. And one of the biggest things he needs to focus on, no doubt, is education. And I'll go a step further. Education of women needs to be a priority. And to be honest with you, of everything I've seen, even the corruption prosecution stuff, education policy and push has been the biggest thing lagging in the country and specifically with this administration. And then number three, in the meantime, with lower wage work coming into Zona Franca areas like in Punta Cana and Santiago, those lower wage workers need housing. Look, there's some people that say there's no low income housing coming here, and that's BS. I could tell you from coming here for many years that what Verón used to look like near Punta Cana was a bunch of tin shacks, and now it's concrete buildings, and people like my housekeeper are able to live in those concrete buildings. The price is going up, no doubt, and there needs to be more of that, but there's been some focus. However, in places like Santiago and still here in Verón, there needs to be continued focus in the meantime on low-income housing. Either that means crediting investors who build it for them, or the government subsidizing some level of low-income housing in these areas. If they execute on all of these things and actually build a more upskilled labor force specifically around semiconductors, then those people will be able to afford more middle-income housing. But for right now, there needs to be that investment to stabilize those that are working in the textile and medical device industry that get lower wages. So that's it. That's my take on it. I think I just solved all of the Dominican Republic's problems. I've just created a middle class. And I've even given Abinader, who, what does he do? He runs a country. What do? I make vlogs, baby. Who do you think knows more what to do, me or him? Actually, it's not a bad question because most politicians don't know what the hell they're doing. But yeah, so we've got a plan here and I'm excited about it. And to be honest with you, something that kind of jumped out at me, or pumped out at me, either one, it pumped and jumped, was the fact that Randy Carr found information about the Dominican Republic as a business hub on ChatGPT. ChatGPT is pulling information from the internet. The internet is populated with a bunch of talking heads and bloviating losers like me. And I'm not the only, but there's a few like us. And all of you patronizing a channel like this and diving in and taking in the content and showing the internet and the world like, wow, this is a really interesting topic, creates information for people like Randy Carr to digest. So I'd like to think we're a small piece of what's bringing the attention to the Dominican Republic and creating what looks like a manufacturing boom in country right now in the textile and whatever industry, but in the future, sky's the limit. Sky's the limit. Listen, if you're somebody who's just like, nope, never, Dominican Republic, never, then I don't know why you watch. Maybe it's because you have hope in your heart, but your brain just won't allow it. There are some key indicators showing that there's a pathway for prosperity in the Dominican Republic going forward. And if you need to see from the past, I mean, just look at the last 10 years, the amount of growth there's been. Tons of work to do around electricity, around finishing projects like train lines, but there's also been a hell of an investment here and a lot of progress in just the last decade. So don't believe if you don't want to, stay on the couch and be skeptical if you will, but boy, oh boy, there's an opportunity for investment, there's an opportunity for real estate, there's an opportunity for a lot of things that may go by the wayside in a developing nation on the brink of getting a better credit rating that will actually bring rates down. I mean, a lot of potential. I'm optimistic, sure, but I'm also, I think, very realistic, and I've shared with you some of the things I don't think anybody can dispute. Corruption needs convictions and prison time. Education needs to be invested in. You need to stay the course with semiconductors because it is a higher skilled sort of industry, and you need to support low-income housing. I think that's all reasonable and fair to say. I think we all agree those are things that we can do. Where we might disconnect is, do you believe whether or not that can actually happen? I'm not a Dominican man. I've been coming here a long time. I wouldn't have believed it 10 years ago. I would have been a little bit less skeptical 5 years ago, and I'm becoming even less skeptical today. So what say you? Drop it down in the comments. Let me know. I appreciate you following along, and I'll see you on the next video.